They want students to master material. They want them to graduate. These are all noble goals. But children are not widgets. We're not all cranking out product. If students don't advance, then the state says, well, you're a bad school because X number of students failed these grades.
Hey there, fellow educators, and honestly, anyone who's ever wondered what would happen if we actually listened to teachers for once. I'm Leah Cleary, and this is If Teachers Ruled the World. You know, after 25 years in the classroom, I've learned that teaching isn't really about having all the answers. It's about being brave enough to ask the right questions, and maybe, just maybe, admitting when we have no idea what we're doing, which, let's be honest, happens more often than we'd like to admit. So grab your coffee, or whatever, and let's talk about the real stuff, the messy, imperfect, sometimes beautiful reality of what it's like to shape young minds while trying to keep our own sanity intact. Because if we're going to change the world, we might as well be honest about what that actually looks like. All right, let's dive in. I'm so pleased to introduce Laura French. She's been teaching for 25 years and in 3 different states. This gives her a unique perspective on how education policies play out differently across the country. She's seen firsthand how the same mandates can create completely different realities depending on where you're teaching. Laura and I were colleagues back in my English teaching days, and one of the things I've always admired about her is that she's a deep thinker. When you ask Laura a question, she'll pause. She'll just go very quiet for a moment and then come out with something just so profound. She has this gift for taking abstract concepts and relating them to the contemporary world through analogies that just make everything click. Laura is still teaching English today, and when she responded to my teacher law question, her answer revealed something troubling about well-intentioned policies. I knew immediately this was a conversation you needed to hear. I hope you'll enjoy this conversation as much as I did. All right, let's hear what Miss French has to say. I'm here today with Laura French, an English teacher extraordinaire who knew me way back when I was an English teacher, and that was a very, very, very long time ago. Laura, how long has it been since we worked together?
Oh, wow, at least 9 years. I think this is my 9th year at my newer school.
Okay, so
But
it's been a while.
yeah, sadly.
Well, I'm really glad to have you here today. It's great to see you again. I loved working with you at our old stomping grounds. Yeah. We were in the English department together, and then I jumped ship, went to social studies, and we still work together at the same school. Do you remember how nobody could ever tell us apart?
I do remember that, and I remember thinking it was kind of strange because beyond the color of our hair, I guess our general complexion, relative age group, build. I mean, now that I'm saying it, people could be forgiven. But I do know kind of what it's like to be a twin now, I guess, because when people would act like they knew me, I just would play along so they wouldn't be embarrassed.
I did the same thing. People would call me Miss Frenchman and say, yeah, what you need?
Yeah, yeah. And
Do you remember that time that I was on the way to my son's school on my planning, and I caught some of our students skipping, and I turned them in to the resource officer, and he wrote a report, and the school secretary wrote a report, and they both said that Miss French turned the kids in.
no, but that is funny, and I'm sorry that I'm the one who got credit for your crime fighting.
No, I didn't correct them because I thought it was funny. I've been in social studies for a really long time now. When I read your response about critical thinking and communication tools in your form that you filled out, I thought, that's Laura. I remember that you were always talking about critical thinking, communication tools. Do you want to talk about that for just a second? What you think is really important for students? And also, I think your elementary school thing is kind of interesting. Like what kids should learn in elementary school and what they
Oh,
can learn.
initially when a person would think about being an English teacher, I think probably the first thing I thought about literature, grammar, writing, but I didn't think of it in terms broader sense. And now that I've been doing it a while, I feel like a lot of it boils down to that transferable skill. Because what I like to tell my students is if the stuff that we do in my room is only useful in my room, then I don't think I'm doing a very good job. It needs to be applicable outside.
Really good. And so I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you give me an example of something that you do in your room that maybe we would think of as very non-transferable? Like studying Shakespeare or something that you're trying to make it applicable to the real world?
Well, I guess since you said Shakespeare, when I'm trying to get them to not decide ahead of time it's not useful or that they hate it. Sidebar, obviously, there's things that enrich a person's life that don't necessarily translate to monetary gain in their career or what have you. It just improves our lives to know some things. But I would say the language isn't very familiar to you, the structure of it, but you know the words or you know most of the words. Use this as practice to read through something that's kind of difficult. You might be reading on track that uses some lingo that you are unaccustomed to or sentence structure or what have you, but you're already accustomed to picking out, focusing on what you do understand. Feel like some of the literature doesn't really hit with kids. I teach British literature, which is a requirement for graduation in my district, although interestingly, not the state. My district goes for it to be British literature. Yeah, I investigated that, and apparently there is another one that could be used for graduate credit.
Do you know what that is off the top of your head?
Maybe modern literature, but I'd have to go back. I think that I got a little frustrated and didn't revisit it because a lot of what's in the curriculum is very old, and especially non-white students, and even white kids, can they relate to stories told by Anglo-Saxons? What I try to do with Beowulf, etc., is just focus on the superhero aspects of it and, any kind of story structure stuff. Not everybody's going to read fiction for fun when they graduate, but most people watch movies.
That's true. We just went to see Fantastic Four. Superhero movie.
There you go. So, if you focus on archetypes or tropes, there's certain things that just hit for human beings that they just like in a story. We like stories, so let's look at the structure of it a little bit or that sort of thing. But it is harder to things that are 1,000 years old hit the same way. Although, they do like the dirty stories from the Canterbury Tales.
Those are always good. The Miller's Tale. That's a classic one. Miller's Tale.
It certainly is.
That's one thing that I've always really admired about your approach to English. You're very practical and you're always thinking about how can this transfer to the student's life. So I think that is an excellent approach, and it's one that I don't see. I see some English teachers taking it, but a lot of English teachers don't really take that. They kind of just want to say, okay, let's study this literature and just talk about why it's so great and all of the imagery and themes and all of that. But I like how you make it applicable.
A mentor of mine at one of the schools where I've taught, she said, let's just use The Great Gatsby as an example. I don't remember the specific book, but she said, we're not teaching The Great Gatsby. We're teaching, symbolism using The Great Gatsby. We're teaching the impact of setting on story using The Great Gatsby. So she kind of helped me see the emphasis of vehicle to critical thinking. It's not just here's what happened and then here's what happened. It's analytical. So again, try to think about what's transferable. If you can think deeply about a novel, then you could probably think deeply about something else.
That was a brilliant mentor you had. So now let's segue into your policy, because this segment is the podcast namesake, If Teachers Ruled the World. And you came up with a policy that I thought was really good. And it's something that, well, teachers at my school have been a buzz about for a while. We've talked a lot about, being called a bad school if we hold students accountable for their learning. And so can you tell us what your policy is and then break it down just a little bit?
I can't remember the exact wording, but it was more something to the effect of students should be allowed to be accountable for their learning or failure to learn, because it feels like a lot of educational policy is developed by well-meaning people. Their intentions are very good academics and legislators who want all students to succeed. They want schools to teach children what they need to know to move to the next grade. They want students to master material. They want them to graduate. These are all noble goals, but children are not widgets. We're not all cranking out product. If students don't advance, then the state says, well, you're a bad school because X number of students failed these grades.
Quality control in a factory.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Students aren't widgets. We're not cranking out products.
Yeah. And you don't know who's going to be good at what. So an elementary school teacher is under pressure to, promote a child from 4th to 5th grade, drags them through. The elementary school is under pressure to promote to middle school. The middle school doesn't want to have bad statistics, so they give a kid 50 chances to get a 70 on something so they can get them out. It goes all the way through until we end up with seniors who are functionally illiterate. You have algebra classes full of students with very poor number sense. They're just basics that they're missing. And someone cynical or outside of the system could say, oh, well, that child has been failed by their schools and they've been failed by their teachers. Maybe, but I refuse to believe that by the time I see a student at 12th grade, their previous 11 plus teachers were all bad.
Right.
That's just not even logical.
No, it's not.
And it seems like all the people who have consequences when a student fails are the teacher. Why, like your personal statistics, why did 2 people in your 2nd grade class not get promoted? What's wrong with you? If you have a certain number, somebody's going to ask the administrator, why are you such a failure to have this many kids not do well?
That is maybe saying that, well, this child is still reading on a 1st grade level and we need to bring the child up before they can move on to the next level, right?
Yes, absolutely. And there's enormous pressure to pass kids on. There's enormous pressure to have a certain percentage of kids do this or do that. It's sad. I get these seniors. I want to do stuff with them. I want to give them tools so they can do better in college or wherever they're headed next, and, have these ideas, or I'm like, well, what if, do they need this? They need that? And people are being honest with me and just say, to paraphrase, nobody really cares. They just need you to get these kids graduated.
Right. I know exactly what you're talking about.
We have to care a lot about our stats or we're a bad school.
Right. Oh my goodness. Let's just bring it down to the individual level, because you shared a story about a student that you're calling Danny that really illustrates why this law that you mentioned is needed. Can you walk us through what happened?
He was in a senior class. He was a poor reader. He did not enjoy school, which I am not surprised, because if you are not a good reader, you're going to struggle all around. He was from a disadvantaged background. His family moved fairly frequently due to financial issues. He was a student who worked with the social workers on campus. He had access to extra help with homework, tutoring, food, clothing, because he did have a very disadvantaged situation, but he really could not read very well. And I wanted to figure out, well, does that mean he had been missed? Like, should he have gotten a referral at some point for services? He was deemed for, I looked at his records, for whatever reason, it was decided that he did not need it.
So they decided that he didn't need an IEP, an individual education plan?
Correct, but, I'm almost kind of suspicious because I just don't know how somebody could struggle that much without having some kind of issue. Now, it's entirely possible, people who are hungry or who are tired or, stressed from the constant worry about money. Yeah, it'd be hard to learn in that situation. So it could be as simple as that. All of that aside, there is individual agency within that system. And I think some of it, at least in our school, was that people understood that he had a difficult situation and they felt bad for him, which I also understand, but it sort of translated into him not being held accountable. He has a difficult situation,
Which ultimately, when you think about it, is just going to set him up for future failure.
Oh, yeah. He's not competitive in the workplace. And ultimately, it did harm him because he wanted to be in the military. And he did so poorly on the ASVAB that he wasn't really a good candidate. And then in addition, you do have to graduate from high school. And so he was missing a lot of credits. At my school, you don't have to pass one English class to go to the next. They just put you in it.
Right. That's a whole other issue, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So he was missing credits, but we're still trying to graduate him if possible. But he would ask to go see the social workers and get a pass and then disappear for half an hour, just wander campus.
So he was taking advantage of the situation.
Yes, and I get it, but it wasn't my, I'm that teacher. I'm not going to let you go somewhere just because you asked. But because somebody in another class would let him go, I wouldn't see him, or he wouldn't come to class. Sometimes when he was there, he was rude, which is fine. Teenagers can be rude.
No.
But again, nobody really wanted to discipline him seriously because they really don't want to put people in in-school suspension if they, quote, are only disrespectful, because they're trying to not have bad statistics as far as discipline is concerned. So, we'll work with them. No. A lot of people like it, but a lot of people like that. I like my daughter, but she'll have consequences, right?
Right. I wish the same with my son.
Yeah. And his mother was supportive and she wanted him to do well, but she just...
That was her love for him, that she wanted for him to have consequences too.
She didn't like it, obviously. There's hardly, she's like, you need to do the right thing. She would say that, but I think she just worked long hours. She was just overwhelmed. So she did what she could, but ultimately, too, a 17-year-old is going to do what he's going to do,
True.
And I didn't dislike him. He was a nice kid. He just, but I tried to do what I could to help him. I knew he wanted to go in the military, so I talked to him about, well, here's some stuff we can look at that'll help on the ASVAB. He really liked the ROTC instructor. I talked to him. I talked to his guidance counselor. Talked to here's some assignments that he can do with y'all and the social workers. Here's some stuff you could do with him to try to get his credit. I was doing most of the work, trying to figure out all these different things I could do to help him. And he became a parent when he thought he wasn't going to graduate. Then he kicked it into gear. Then he started doing stuff. Then he started coming to class, staying awake during class, all these things, because there was going to be a consequence that he did not want. He wanted to graduate and go in the military. So I thought, what would it have been like? Everybody has a different ability level, but wherever it is, it can be raised. What would it have been like if when he he was 10, he was like, "Oh no, I'm not going to move up with my friends. I better work. I better do what I can here." So,
Yeah. So what do you
feel
think, like, if his 5th grade teacher when he was 10, if his 5th grade teacher could have held him back without any consequences to the school or to himself or herself, do you think that maybe Danny's life would have been different?
it's possible. Or, yeah, because some of that is just, it's not even abilities. Unfortunately, a lot of school is just, well, it's actually like a lot of life. Just show up and do the work. You don't have to be a genius. You just have to put some effort in. Everybody can learn something, but it's so depressing how many students I have who decide they're going to be world class about the middle of April because they want to graduate. Oh, that's a hard deadline. That is a specific consequence. I mean, how many students have you had where you tell them, well, you're not passing, and they shrug, how much do I have to do so I qualify for credit repair?
Right. At the 11th hour, they start trying when they haven't been trying all year or all semester. What would you say? And you did mention that it was depressing. Would you say that there was an emotional toll being his teacher, knowing you were expected essentially to provide, it seems like, 10 years of education in 1 year if you're going to do the job right?
Oh, absolutely. I never dreamed when I went to grad classes forever ago when I said I want to be a teacher that I would need to teach reading, that I would tell people that you use big letters for people's names.
You don't think about that as a high school teacher, do you? I mean, in training, obviously, it's part of our reality.
Sure, but it's so frustrating to read the state standards. Here's what a student should master in X grade. Well, all of those standards are predicated on the belief that a student will have mastered the previous ones before coming to you.
That's so true.
So how are we going to move forward if they don't have a foundation? And this is all kids. This isn't just, struggling students. All kids, a lot of them are not where we would want them to be based upon what's in the standards and all that professional development resources. We had a great grammar resource, but they said you are only allowed to use the resources that match the grade you're teaching. And that was rough because, they're supposed how to use commas way before my grade. So there was a lot of comma stuff I couldn't access.
Oh my, I guess I shouldn't be surprised because that's pretty typical, but wow, that is just telling you to, bring these kids up, teach these kids, and then ripping the tools to do it, to actually practically do it away from you.
Yeah. Isn't that how it frequently is though? But and all of those people above my pay grade, that it's not that they're saying, "Oh, we can't." I'm not even calling those people out. Some administrators are better than others at balancing keeping kids accountable, but they're under pressure from the central office, who's under pressure from the state. That's just it. And a friend of mine, and I have no idea why this hadn't really occurred to me previously. A friend of mine blew me away. He said, if you think about a college, he said, what if you were talking about a college that was difficult to get into and the coursework was very difficult and people, like a decent number of people flunked out? He said, you would say, wow, that's a really good school. That's a really tough school.
He said, true.
But it's just the opposite. And I have no idea why I hadn't thought of that, but
I have never thought about that, but that is so true.
like
Your friend needs to be on this show.
Oh, absolutely. You could think about, if you're talking about some college where, all you have to do is apply and you're going to graduate in 4 years.
Go there.
Who respects that degree? Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe lots of people want to go there, but you're right. That degree won't be respected.
Yeah. And so what this engenders is that when a student does meet that hard deadline of graduation and they can't, their parents are often baffled. Because their response is sometimes to the effect of, well, she's been coming to school 12 years. She's there every day. She does her work. Kids tell their parents they do. But as both of us have had to tell students, like getting it done and doing it well, two different things.
Very different.
But, my initial reaction when a parent's surprised, all right, why wouldn't he graduate? And we're all thinking, because he doesn't do anything. From the parent's perspective, well, there's never been a problem before because he's never been held accountable before. He's allowed to turn in a half a semester's worth of assignments the last week of school. So really, all the consequences are for the teacher.
That's true.
And then, of course, because we have a lot of students like that we need to focus on, we spend a lot of time dragging through very reluctant kids when there's a number of kids who are just quiet and just do what they're supposed to do. They don't get the attention from us that I think they deserve.
Right.
No question, this kid's going to pass. They're doing all right. But what if I could give that kid some more attention and get them from B's to A's? What if we could get that C kid who never causes any problems? He always passes. He always does fine. What if we could get him from a C to a B?
That's the $1,000,000 question. We do.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of our time focusing on the at-risk kids. We should, obviously.
Absolutely.
No, we definitely should. But I think that a lot of the reason when we do it to the extent that we do it, we're neglecting everybody else. And that's problematic.
Because the state says you're a bad school if, this child doesn't pass.
So I know you have taught in 3 different states. And that's a really great perspective for me because I've only taught in the one. I teach in Georgia, and that's the only state I've ever taught in. And for us, it is CCRPI, Georgia's College and Career Ready Performance Index. That's how schools are rated. And so there is a lot of pressure for us to enroll as many kids as we can in CTI and AP courses, to enroll as many kids as we can in all of the advanced courses, and then to raise our graduation rates, right? That's how schools are graded. So how does that CCRPI pressure affect what happens in your classroom specifically?
I think it's probably pretty easy for me we just got to get these kids graduated if they're anywhere near. The other thing is that I, for a number of years, have facilitated 1 block a day of class where students make up credits online. It's a large program. There's always other teachers in there. There's a number of us. So a student could make up to 8 credits per semester. And you will be unsurprised to hear that for a number of kids, learning is not the goal. Getting the credit is the goal.
Yeah, checking the boxes, getting the credit, moving them through. That's what things like CCRPI do.
Yes.
They make it about checking boxes instead of about learning.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, if somebody's already struggling, they're behind their credit, I get it, but we have helped to feed that because how did this person get so many credits behind to begin with? Why do we keep passing them along? Because a number of kids, they're not in this program. Most of them do not have IEPs. A lot of them are just incredibly unmotivated, and they probably do have deficits of some kind, but we got to get them out. And so that's frustrating because I'm not there to be a babysitter. I want people to learn things. I want them to, whatever skill level they have, improve it. It's just the nature of the beast. I don't think that any of the administrators at my school see their mission as we must get these kids out of here in 4 years, no matter what. I don't care if they learn anything or not. If you asked any of them, they wouldn't say that. That's not what they're about, but they're under a tremendous amount of pressure to get them out with their cohort in 4 years.
They are. They really are. And, I wonder if maybe there's a broader economic piece at play here. Do you think? I don't know. You're a lot smarter than I am, Miss French. So I want to ask you what you think here. These scores, when we look at scores, they affect property values, real estate, community perception, all of that stuff. Would you agree with that and think that maybe that's part of the pressure that administrators might be feeling, maybe from the board and superintendents and people who have an interest in attracting people to the community? Do you think that plays a part in it?
Yes. Some of it is definitely, hey, look at us, how great we are. But if we're gonna hold people accountable, then we have to put things in place to support people in that. There's a lot of kids who start school already behind. They have not been exposed to things that other kids have been exposed to. Maybe they haven't gotten to go on vacations to visit other places. Maybe their parents did not read to them. Maybe they start out at a disadvantage. What if we had universal preschool? What if every kid was some degree ready to learn when they got there? What if elementary school teachers didn't have to spend their time worrying about if a 6-year-old could pass a state test and they just focused on reading and math? Just nail that down. Yes.
What a dream. Yeah, standardized tests for a third grader, it just seems kind of ludicrous, doesn't it?
It does. And kids at different rates. In a gifted class one time, I made some joke. I said, "Oh, I thought this was a gifted class." And this kid said, "We were superstars in first grade and we've been coasting ever since."
I like that kid.
Me too, because he's got something, right? If you look at the makeup of a number of gifted classes, it's kids whose lives have been enriched by things their parents were able to do to expose them to.
Yes.
And so some of it is just background. And it's frustrating for a school with a different demographic to get compared to another school. I mean, my parents went to college. Their friends went to college. So the adults in my life had certain expectations. They worked in different jobs. There were things I was aware of I maybe wouldn't have been aware of otherwise. There was no question I was going to graduate from high school. That wasn't even a thing. That was a given. That was an expectation. And because of my parents' background, I had tools I needed to get there. So it almost seems unfair if you just take a population of kids whose parents, for the most part, graduated from college and work in some profession. Yeah, those kids are going to graduate from high school. And I'm not saying that we need to not have high expectations, but we do want to have realistic ones. And if you truly want for people to, all students will learn a high level. Well, try to give people the tools to be at a high level early on, and then they be able to say, your child needs a lot more work in this one area. So we're going to work with them when a child is 7, not when they're 17.
Yeah. I do want to bring this up, actually. This is a question that I really wanted to ask. It might be coming out of nowhere, but I think growth mindset is something that we're all probably tired of hearing about. I think that it's a great thing. I love the whole idea of growth mindset, but I think that the problem with it is that we are working in a system that has fundamentally a fixed mindset, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Right. So it's almost like the whole growth mindset thing when you think about how kids need a certain GPA for college, a certain standardized test scores, CCRPI scores at schools, grade levels, all of that. That's a massive contradiction to say, hey, teachers, teach growth mindset, but then the system operates with a fixed mindset mentality. What do you think about that? How do you handle that contradiction?
I'm a big fan of nuance. There's very few things that are either all one thing or all the other. And growth mindset is one of those because the way that people talk about it is it's either all one or all the other. And I ended up, because we had to do stuff like that at school, and I ended up inventing a little chart where I broke down the different aspects of it. And they just needed to pick the box that you think you're on for each category and then look at the next box up. And that's your goal.
I like that.
Which is like people can handle that. It's also a bit more specific. So the idea is to also sort of visually see, well, here's where I am. I can go up one. Nobody's asking me to go all the way to the top. I just need to go one step further, and that is good for me. The trick with that mathematically is the grades get in the way of that. I would love to be in a system where they say, here's where you are. Here's your improvement. Yay for you. But we still have to give everybody a A, B, C, D, F grade.
Completely lacks nuance, right?
Yeah, like here's me saying, I just want you to improve. But here's also me saying, grades are due, or you need to pass, or you need to whatever. So it's difficult, and just I am not great with math. So if I'm sure that there's a formula out there somewhere where I could somehow plug age improvement and translate that into a number between 1 and 100, so that there's only so many hours, right? I
Right.
can't grade every single person's work completely different, because I would never get to go home.
No, you wouldn't.
But I see that, and students see it, because what it does also for higher achieving students is it makes them risk avoidant. They might want to try something new, but they can't because they're afraid about tanking their GPA.
Yes.
And being young should be a time to explore new things, or find new interests, or try something different, or what, but they can't. Like in high school, I wanted to take art, but I didn't, because the class was graded on skill, and I am not very skillful. Would it have helped me just as to develop something totally different? Yeah, that's why I didn't take physics. Consequently, I don't know anything about physics, which is
What a tragedy, because the world has missed out on Laura French, the artist.
yeah. Well, I would just be a bit better at drawing. Well, and I would understand levers and force and things like that make sense to other people.
But we stayed in our lane because we were so worried about GPA and things like that.
Yes, and I even did that in college because I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I needed to have a high enough GPA that if I were trying to go to whatever grad school, that wouldn't hurt me. And that's a classic thing with because we've been talking about lower achieving students, but that system that we've set up, it doesn't reward learning or trying something new. It rewards going back over and over the thing that you're good at, so that your grades are good.
Yes, it does. That is absolutely true. And so I think that is one major issue with our system. And so I want to ask you now, what would you want policymakers to understand about what this pressure does to teachers? Because, oh my goodness, it's so frustrating to want to see our students grow, but either to watch the really high achievers not want to branch out for fear of getting a bad grade. And, what we've spent so much time talking about on the other end, students who were pressured to pass along because of things like CCRPI. So what does this pressure do to teachers?
Feels like you can't win. My brother is a high school basketball coach, and he said one time, I cannot believe that my livelihood depends upon whether or not some 16-year-olds can shoot.
That's true. Oh my goodness, yes.
It's weird that I'm responsible for a lot of things that I don't have a lot of control over.
Yes.
And when you try to do things the right way, the system gets in the way instead of helping you, which is an entirely different discussion. Like, there's plenty. Can we say, I love it when I have a parent who says, hold him accountable. He shouldn't be doing this, or he should have been turning his work in, or XYZ is not acceptable. And then they follow through that, because I feel like we're on a team. And I just feel like sometimes it feels like it's the teacher who is to take responsibility, not the kid, not the parent.
Yeah.
And the administration wants to go with whatever the parent wants, because it's more of a customer service model in some cases, it feels like. But yeah, but I think that would build a culture of accountability, because again, parents are like, well, he's never gotten in trouble for not following the dress code before, why now? Then they get mad. But if they'd have known since the beginning that was a thing with consequences, let's stop. Now, obviously, that's not going to work all the time, because people are not widgets. Humans have free will, and they can be unpredictable.
The free will conundrum.
Yes. And then I think the other thing too is it's just difficult. I was trying to think about what jobs are out there where people are trying to prevent you from doing your job while you're doing it. And then
Is there another one? Because that is literally what our job feels like a lot of the
it
time.
really does. I thought maybe police officers, maybe prison wardens, maybe. But if you think about if a lawyer's clients are frequently late to their appointments or they skip them, they schedule an appointment to see their lawyer and then they don't show up. Does anyone say to that lawyer, I don't think you're very good at your job because people are not coming to their appointments on time?
Yeah.
And then to the state licensing board, well, this lawyer, X number of his clients, their attendance is poor, and then he gives them advice that they don't follow. So what? This is a failing law practice. If you think about it in other terms, it just sounds absurd.
It does. So why do you think we treat teachers that way? Why do we approach education from that angle?
Oh gosh, I bet there's lots of fairly embedded cultural and historical reasons for that. It could be a case of just people who are not on the ground making decisions. You said something earlier about, well, how would that play out? I can't remember exactly how you put it, but I thought, what if not implementers, inventors, is that the word, it ultimately is economic, policy, had to pass all the same tests that the kids have to take. So what if they all had to take the same test and just to see what that is? What if all of them were required to be substitutes for a week in some district, not of their choosing? You would be randomly assigned to a number of different schools, different levels. So you actually see firsthand in it, not walking through it for the dog and pony show, just, undercover boss almost, just go be a sub, try to make copies, try to deal with, all the things that people deal with on a daily basis. And they may not change their minds about any of that policies, but it would still be an informed decision, or a more informed decision.
Yeah. I think that I want to ask you one more question. And that, you kind of answered it a little, but not fully. And that is, what would accountability look like in a system designed by teachers? Because, you just talked about making policymakers actually come to the school and take the tests and walk among the students and sit in classrooms as substitute teachers. But how would our accountability system change if teachers designed it?
I think people who understand statistics a lot better than I do, we can figure out some kind of way early on to break down those very specific reading skills, figure out for the teacher to identify mastery. Because if you ask a child's teacher, especially in a situation where they have the same kid in the same room all day, all year long, they know what those kids can do and they can't do.
That is so true.
They've been working with them all year. And so they could tell you. I mean, this is what they tell people tell parents when they meet with them. Well, he's struggling with this thing. So we say, okay, here's his strength, here's his deficits, and then work with them on the deficits, develop the strengths, and then circle back to it. That's essentially what a report card is supposed to be, but often that's more a reflection of work ethic, and there isn't really anything wrong with that. I mean, honestly, if nobody had ever made me do math, and if I wasn't worried about my math career, I probably wouldn't have learned any of it because I disliked it so much.
Right.
So there should still be some kind of measure like that. They tried to do it in Kentucky. Long story short, there was a lot of inequality in Kentucky's educational system for a lot of reasons, much of it having to do with property taxes and the extreme poverty of some areas. So when they were working on improving the testing situation. They really went to a lot of effort to try to be more creative in how they evaluated people. And there were some hits and misses, but they were trying. So the pilot was when I was in high school. And by the time I was teaching, they kept elements and gotten rid of certain elements. But something that a student worked on a writing portfolio, and there were different types of writing that followed them throughout high school. So they would work on different pieces, put them, get this, on paper in an actual folder.
What? No.
Yeah. And their teacher the next year would get that portfolio so they could read through it, get a sense of their skill. They would edit items that they'd already written. And a number of us, we'll just write something one time and that's it. But if you figure any person's serious in their career, if something's important, they're not going to just write it and not edit if you care about the quality of something. So there were certain pieces they were allowed to edit. And in order to graduate, you needed to have the equivalent of at least 50%, which is actually not terrible considering you got to spend all of high school editing those pieces. One was a letter to the reviewer reflecting on your writing. One was a personal narrative. And there were 3 wild cards, 2 of which had to come from a class outside of English. Could be a lab report, could be a history paper, it could be something from, I think they even allowed like recipes or things from classes, but it was writing outside of English class. But what I liked about it was that wherever it was you were, it was the idea of constant improvement. You wrote this thing last year. Do you want to expand on it? You want to make it better? We can make it better. You don't have to use it in the one that you turn in when you're a senior. But I'm going to give you, we gave kids grades for things that they'd already written that they worked to improve. A friend of mine went to a college in New Jersey, and she was told that students from Kentucky that they got knew how to write.
Wow, I like that system. I like that idea a lot.
Yes, yeah. And the English teachers scored it, but we had to be officially trained every year. But they paid for us for a sub for 2 days. 2 different people had to read it.
Oh wait, you got a sub that they paid for, and they paid you to train. You didn't have to do it on your own time. That's amazing.
Yeah, you didn't just mail them off to the state. Now, we had to stop periodically and calibrate just to make sure that we were all scoring. If 2 people agreed on the portfolio score, it would stay. But if 2 people disagreed, it went to a third person. And it was 4 levels. You just needed, I think it was the basic, beginner, proficient, whatever. And I think that they don't do that anymore to that extent because time and money.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier and faster to fill in bubbles or to write a paragraph that a computer can score. But it taught the process. And the whole idea was just continuous improvement. And it was interdisciplinary because they had to have stuff from other classes that they could also edit. But I feel like that is a good example of they're taking responsibility for their learning. Their teacher is also responsible for helping them with their learning. And the letter to the reviewer, part of that is reflecting on their improvement. And so part of what that included was, okay, I wrote this thing and here's how I made it better. Here's what I learned in that process. And that's ideally what we're supposed to be doing. Now, if somebody in a system continually fails, then they need some interventions. But maybe we don't know somebody needs an intervention if we keep giving them 70s and sending them to the next grade.
Oh, yeah. Laura, I want to thank you for
Thank you.
sharing Danny's story and your law. I love it. I'm going to elect you. I'll vote for you when you run for school board. Yes. And for listeners who want to think a little more about this, what's one thing they can do in their own classrooms or schools?
Wow. Because there's a number of things in teaching, you don't know if it works or not, because you can't crawl inside somebody's head and then know whether or now it was helpful to them.
Right.
But I do think perhaps just encouraging people to focusing on the getting better, or let's find something that will work to help you focus, maybe, because they all want to graduate, but that feels like a really long time from now. So what is something that okay, you want to work on cars, you want to run your own business, you need to be able to write well enough that you look like you know what you're doing, that banks want to give you money they want to give you a business loan. Because I kind of feel in this situation sort of powerless about accountability. I mean, I do yammer a lot about if you don't pay your electric bill on time, there will be a penalty. It's a late fee. I describe the penalty that comes out of an assignment they turn in late. I'm like, that's your late fee. And then if you never pay your light bill, then they're getting turned off.
That's true.
The real world does have consequences, which is why we're supposed to be helping them with this. And so I guess the fact that I keep nagging them about analogous situations in life, my principal going to want to keep me if I roll in late, whatever we can grab onto. Let's just do that, I guess.
That sounds good. I like the analogies that you tell. They clarify things for me. I'm sure they do for your students too. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Laura. And it's great to talk to you.
Oh, absolutely. Same here.
I hope this conversation hit home for you like it did for me. Laura nailed something so many of us feel but struggle to articulate. I know at least I do. How policies with good intentions can create impossible situations for teachers and devastating outcomes for students. She's spot on about the impact of school report cards like CCRPI. The intent might be accountability, but the reality has been passing students through the system instead of ensuring they're actually learning. We're graduating students who are ill-equipped to read, write, and navigate this complex world. What if we actually practice the growth mindset that we preach? What if we measured real learning instead of just checking graduation boxes? If Laura's story resonates with you, or if you have your own teacher law you'd like to discuss on the show, visit leahcleary.com/guest form. I'd love to hear from you. That's it for this week on If Teachers Ruled the World. Be sure to subscribe, share with a teacher friend, and join the conversation at leahcleary.com. Until next time, keep ruling your classroom and rewriting the rules.